Self-Destruct sequence activated.
And what's going on, everybody? Welcome to Self-Destruct Sequence Podcast. Filling in for Dr. Zing, I'm Ronkley.
And I'm Morphi. Thank you very much for joining us. It is Saturday, January 9th, and this is episode 9. How very convenient.
Very nice. And with us this week, we have Catherine Darrow, a.k.a. Dracona. Welcome aboard.
Hi.
Good to have you. And, of course, for those that don't know, Dracona is the maintainer of the source port DXX Retro. Of course, last week we had, God, I forget how to pronounce it right. Zico on, yes. So
he was from the Rebirth project, and Retro builds off of Rebirth, if I recall correctly.
And
that's right.
Can you go over how that fork happened?
When I came back to the community in June of a couple of years ago, there was some trouble with the homing missiles, and I wasn't there for most of the trouble. It had been a year or so that people had been having trouble with how they worked and getting them to be frame independent and getting them how they liked it. And I said, well, I have an idea. Let's run the old homing missile code at 30 hertz and just, set that to what it should be. And we'll run with that. So I put out a proof of concept. I was just like, here's a build with that. And people loved it so much they started playing it a ton. It was just this little proof of concept build hosted on my Dropbox, right? And Naphtha actually named it. He said these are like retro homers. So we all played retro homers for a while. And as time went on, we collected a few more things that we wanted to fix in Rebirth. We had aiming problems, we had some problems with the tracker, and just kind of collected 3 or 4 things together that we're waiting for the next Rebirth release, and these are things that we need to be able to play well right now. And eventually that got to be a lot of things. About a year later, Merle and DK and Jed said, you really need to fork this project so that you can do some deep changes. You can add peer-to-peer to the netcode. And I kind of hemmed and hawed about it. We had been treating it as a mod on top of Rebirth for a long time, and I didn't want to offend the Rebirth guys because they had done so much work on the project, and I'm profoundly grateful to them.
Absolutely.
But eventually it's like, okay, we'll fork it, and that was right before we did the peer-to-peer stuff, and that was about a year before DU came out, and we started getting a lot of players. And I actually didn't do a whole lot of work on it after that because I would actually much rather fly than code. It kind of landed in my lap, right? I never actually intended to be working on this thing.
Right.
So I avoid projects all the time. And it just kind of has been this snowball collection of little tweaks that players have asked for. It's not like a big overarching project or anything. It's just kind of like a bunch of tweaks on top of Rebirth.
It seems like what the competitive folks want is pretty simple as it is.
Well,
just want the game to be right.
And it's a simple number of changes, but it's things that you kind of want to be a pilot to be very sensitive to what the community wants and what people need to be able to fly. And we're not really closely tied to Rebirth at this point. They actually have done a lot of architecture work on Rebirth, and the number of changes and little subtle things we've done on Retro makes it pretty technically hard to bring the projects back together. Maybe someday.
Yeah, that
it's
was
really
something,
a fork at this point.
That was something that I actually asked, like last week, was do you ever see the 2 projects ended up merging? And his response to that was both of the projects seem to have their place in the Descent community right now, and he thought that was a good thing.
I do too. We're friends with Rebirth Project. We send them stuff, they send us stuff. We love each other. We're not doing the same thing though.
Right. Yeah, and every once in a while, some things that get fixed in Rebirth end up in Retro. Some things get fixed in Retro end up in Rebirth. I know they're working very hard on the homing missiles right now. I think both of the source ports have been at one point or another working on an observatory mode.
That's right.
And that was surprising to find out last week that that was something working on Rebirth. Not for the next version, but apparently a version after that. So it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool that we have these 2 source ports that have an active community of developers that are yeah, looking at improving the game. I know Retro's kind of been a little on the south side lately. I know myself. I have a number of things that I would love to contribute and just haven't made an effort to do it. It's just, I'm in your boat. I would rather play. If I have free time, I would rather open up Descent and shoot things.
But that's the drawback to having pilots as developers, right? The benefit is they know what you want. The drawback is they'd rather play.
Exactly. Well, let's go back even further here. I mean, we had Lothar bot on several. I think it was like 3 months ago or so, and we had talked about how he got into Descent. Let's find out how you started playing Descent.
Oh, this is kind of a fun story. I was 13. It was my 13th birthday, and being a little nerdling, I loved games and I loved programming. And I had asked my dad for a birthday present. I said, I really want a C compiler for my birthday because I've been, studying the stuff on notebook paper. Just a little 13-year-old girl, I want a C compiler for my birthday. Anyways, I didn't get it. My dad gave me a video game instead. He gave me Descent, and I had never heard of it. I was like, what is this? But my best friend was over, and he had heard it. It was the hot PC game at the time, and he ran downstairs and installed it, and I started up, and I flew in like a 360-degree circle, just around on end, and I fell in love so hard and never looked back.
Nice. And of course, you've been involved with just as a community member. You were on the Descent bulletin board probably from the beginning, I imagine, or close to it.
Yeah, pretty much. I was on it from back before it switched over to its final software state. So I'm one of the people that has a registration date in like the 60s or something.
Very nice. Any accomplishments that you had back in the old days that you'd like to speak of?
I was probably best known for being married to a Descent pilot, to be honest. That happens,
Not really something very common, but
that's true.
Yeah, it's pretty uncommon. I have this cool origami pyro. That was probably the thing that people knew me best for, and nobody knew I did this, but I actually did all the technical work to make UDL, which was the ladder after IDL, or kind of in the middle, the alternative ladder. So
very nice.
Those are probably my big achievements. And I was an okay pilot. I was in UF, kind of an elite clan, one of its worst pilots, but that's really all you would know about me. I was a big fan of the game, but not really anybody you would know or recognize from the previous era.
I had forgotten about the origami part from that was something that Lothar went over.
Yeah, those instructions are still online. You can read what my 16-year-old self trying to talk tough on her website. It's hilarious.
That's great.
So I see some of the stuff that you did with the origami, especially the origami pyro, is just an absolute nightmare to even fathom. And I'm thinking, how on earth could I ever have the spatial relation to be able to compete against this lady in Descent? Like,
right. That's funny. All right. So of course, you mentioned that you worked on the UDL ladder. Now, from a guy that has never even touched a 1v1 ladder until DCL, can you explain like the evolution of things between like the IDL, UDL, and the DCL?
Okay, well, I understand the earliest Descent ladders. The earliest one I was aware of was Cases, actually, which was kind of a commercial ladder. Games were to 10. It was not very Descent focused. It was a lot of different games.
By the way, that ladder still exists. And
I know, right? Is that hilarious?
And Jedi Luke is still number 1.
oh,
He's also in last place, but he's number 1.
There's a funny story about that, actually. When we were going to start DCL, I was talking to Judge. I was like, we need a ladder. And he was like, well, there's Cases. We could just go take it over. And I was like, no, I think we can do a little better than that.
So what millionaire is currently just bored with his money and just tossing a couple bucks a month to keep Cases up? I mean...
I know, right? This relic of the 90s is still around. I don't know what's going on with that.
But yeah, I think Cases was the original. Before that was all decentralized stuff, like you would dial into like the West Coast ladder on CompuServe or something weird.
Right. I remember the Australian Descent ladder, and I remember some others, and I've heard about OGL. That was before my time. Anyways, Cases was kind of a very unregulated, very weird ladder, but it had a lot of people on it, right? It had like 200 people. IDL was an attempt to do something better, to do something a little bit more league-like, longer matches, higher skill, help people who are really good pilots find each other. It was invitational. You had to be a certain skill level to be able to get on. and it had a lot of philosophies trying to make the game better. It wanted people to have good attitudes, and it wanted people to play a broad selection of levels, and you were required to play D1 and D2. And IDL was kind of the DCL of its era. Even if you weren't on it, it was the measuring stick by which you looked at all the other pilots. And the people who were the upper tier members of the IDL, which is kind of the equivalent of today's gold and silver, were pilots that everybody knew their names, right? They were the best. There were good pilots who weren't on that ladder too, but that was kind of the backbone of the community for many, many, many years.
Now, just to briefly talk about the lower tier, upper tier, that is actually a little different than how the DCL works. And
yeah, it is.
How did that work exactly? Was it purely invitational, or was there some kind of challenge you had to go through?
Well, to get onto the lower tier, you needed to receive votes from other players that were on the lower tier. They would just play you and they'd say, yeah, I think he's good enough, and they'd give you a thumbs up. That was pretty easy. To go from the lower tier to the upper tier, you had to have upper tier people come and look at your game and say, I think he's good enough, and they would vote yes and no, and it was actually a very difficult process. Very, very few people made it through that process.
Interesting.
But it was a very separated ladder. It was people would play matches upper tier versus upper tier or lower tier versus lower tier, but there was not a lot of cross tier matches. You could play them, but they didn't count for much in the stats. People didn't do a lot. It was mostly kind of to showcase were you ready. So it was very segregated, and the rankings were segregated. There was an upper tier, one on down ranking, and a lower tier one on down ranking, and you couldn't take an upper tier spot if you were lower tier.
Got it.
So it's very different from DCL.
Lothar's in chat. He says the word political needs to be used here.
Okay, well, I'll get to that when we talk about DCL. So, when IDL first launched, there was a tremendous amount of passion for it. But as time went on, as it got to be, 5, 8 years old, there was a feeling in the community that the leadership had kind of lost touch with a lot of the community. Getting into the upper tier was a very political process. Getting onto the ladder was a political process. There were some scandals with cheating, and the people that they thought were cheating, that other people thought weren't, and it was just kind of the community had trouble really believing in the ladder after a while. Manson came to me and said, we need another ladder, somewhere that's not about politics, it's just about playing the game. And so that was...
Just to clarify, who was Manson?
Manson was a good pilot, upper tier pilot. I didn't really know him beyond that. Kind of a rabble rouser, I guess.
So why did he come to you?
I had made a ladder for UF actually before that, so he knew I was capable of making these things.
Okay.
I think he just needed a programmer, to be honest.
Right, so your reputation preceded you.
Yeah, maybe people didn't know I could do that kind of thing. That's interesting. But anyways, he came and said, we need a ladder that is just about playing. And, we kind of based it on some changed community standards. People were no longer as interested in playing D2, so we said, okay, well, D1 is required, D2 is optional. And, a number of other things. It was kind of popular for a while, but it was not as well engineered as IDL to last a long time. It was pretty much just, Manson ran it by himself, and after a year or two, he got really burned out and eventually stopped paying the web hosts, and the whole thing disappeared, which is unfortunate. It was fun.
Ouch.
So,
if I recall correctly, the presence of the UDL actually caused like a small renaissance, 2000 to 2002, there in both the UDL and the IDL.
It did actually.
Came back.
I remember Neitzel came back specifically, but I remember, a number of other people came back. UTL was really popular when it launched, but that popularity only lived for about 6 months.
Okay, and then UDL died when? About 2002?
Yeah, 2002.
Wow, that's a long time to be without any type of competition. But of course, Descent was kind of on the downswing.
The IDL still survived.
IDL lived till about 2007. That's right. Okay. It was very quiet towards the end. I had like 4 people in the upper tier and had to, change the rules so that they could pass voting measures because you needed 5 and all sorts of funny stuff like that.
Oh man!
But people were playing matches as late as 2007.
Yeah, there was even a small mini renaissance in 2005. So.
Yeah, I wasn't there for that. That sounds like fun.
It was that's what motivated me to go out to the West Coast and visit Merle. But Biznatch came back for a short bit. But either way, that's other story.
So that's kind of after my time. I dropped out of the Descent community somewhere in the 2002 to 2006 era. I just kind of dropped off, and so I don't pick it up again until 2013.
All right, so 2013 comes around, and how did you get back into the community?
I had actually worked on a funny little 2D game I called Descent Zero. It's a pyro you fly around on a 2D grid and shoot at robots. And a friend of mine, Foil, really liked it, and it came up on the DBB, and he said, "You should post this game on the DBB." And I was like, I haven't thought about Descent for 8 years, and haven't thought about this game for 10 years, but sure, why not? I'll post it there. So I go over the DBB, and there's this thread in the old school forum that says, "We're playing Descent again. You should come join us." And it's Jedi Luke that posted this thread. And I was like, I've missed this guy. I liked playing him in the old era, and I would really like to play him now. It's a great opportunity. He's playing now. So I was like, okay, how do I get involved? And I showed up on Mumble. That was where you met at the time, the same Mumble server. And at the time, it was pretty much just Ranger games or bust. We were all playing what we now know as Vanilla Rebirth with broken homers, as we now know them. And we were playing Ranger games, and there was no ladder. And but it was a lot of fun, a lot of anarchy, and a very small number of pilots. Back then, you might see like 5 pilots online at once, and the rule was if you were going to start a game, you made sure everybody could get in the game. Otherwise, nobody would get any games. So a very different community, very, very quiet. But DKH had been making levels already for a couple of years, and some of the pilots were very good. Jedi Luke was amazing. DJCJR was probably the best pilot. MD1224 was one of the best pilots.
Right. And so after that, that's probably around the time that Retro came into being, or at least the beginnings of it.
Yeah, well, so I came back, and 5 minutes into the first game, I said, "These homers are horrible. I can't stand them."
Right.
If you've played on Rebirth, you know, and I'm sure they've fixed it by now. We've had discussions, and they know what they need to do.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Can I shoot you through a quick gauntlet of Rebirth questions here?
Sure.
Retro questions. I recall that we talked about the retro homers. Other things that other critical competitive elements. Sniper packets. Can you gloss over those real quick?
Well, sure. Rebirth at the time had a network compression strategy such that your ship's orientation wasn't sent very accurately over the network. It could be off by as much as a full degree. Actually, in some cases, more. I saw it off by 30 degrees in testing occasionally.
Yikes.
And what it would mean is that you would fire a packet on your screen, and where it was pointed on the other guy's screen could be off by an average of about 3 degrees, as much as 30 degrees sometimes. It's like basically no matter what you were shooting spread fire. And that was completely insufferable. So what I did is I had the shot packets carry their own orientation so that they, pointed exactly right, which seems a little bit like a no-brainer. That's actually the way D1 had originally been, and I don't know whether it was a D1X project or the Rebirth project, but somewhere during the maintenance it had been more emphasis on efficiency on the network than on accuracy.
Could this be possibly why people from the D1X 1.3 and 1.4 era back in the late 90s and early 2000s don't remember the Vulcan being a particularly strong point?
I think that might be. Though Vulcan actually has about a degree of randomness built into it, so this is probably the weapon that was affected least. Probably the biggest impact is things like accurately placing smarts over long distances.
Interesting. Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah, you said something like it affecting only 1 degree, and I'm like, well, how can 1 degree really affect a whole lot?
Rotational 1 degree.
Firing weapons, yeah, that's so seeing a ship in that direction may be a bad thing, but actually firing a weapon at that angle, yeah, I can see how that could be an issue.
Yeah.
1 degree is actually a lot in games. Spread fire, if I remember correctly, is a 3.5 degree radius cone. So 1 degree, if you think of it as being off by about a third as much as spread fire, that's going to be pretty useless after about a few cubes.
Yeah, that's true. All right.
So there's sniper packets. You had retro homers. Then there was the issue of peer-to-peer, I believe.
That's right. Rebirth had gone to a client-server mode in a networking sense. Your packets always went to the person who hosted the game before going to the other pilot. So this induced some lag, and we hate lag.
Yeah, indeed.
At least asymmetrical lag. Someone may ping 30 milliseconds to the server, someone else may ping 130. That's going to benefit the low latency person much more when they're combating against the person who's far away.
Yeah, that was much an
That's
issue in
right.
Descent
When
3.
we were playing on Rebirth, there was a blue ship advantage. You had the lowest ping to everybody.
Of course,
Interesting.
because everything else had to be routed through you.
That's right.
So that also meant that only the person who had the best connection could, reasonably host a competitive game.
Now,
That's right. I hosted a lot of games in that era because I'm in the middle of the country and I have a good connection.
Right. Now, was there ever any talk about going to the full Descent 3 model where you have a dedicated server?
I really can't speak for the Rebirth project. I don't think so. I think the client server stuff they did was more to solve networking problems than it was because they wanted something to own the world. That's really not the D1 way.
Yeah, the only problem with not having that type of model that I can see is if you got two people that are behind a firewall they can't get around to host a game, you got two people that can never play each other unless someone hosts an observatory mode.
It's not impossible to do. It's been on the list of things to do in Retro for a long while.
Mm-hmm.
What we do in the peer-to-peer mode is it is what's called a UDP punch-through. We go through firewalls and routers and things. There's an algorithm you follow. It's not that exciting, but it works for most people, and we could make hosting games follow that same algorithm. I just haven't gotten around to it.
Okay. And the last retro thing I'll throw at you, goodness, we had in sniper packets, we had retro homers. Oh, wasn't there something screwy with the collision engine?
There was! I forgot about that until you brought it up. Oh, yeah. They had, I don't know where this came from, whether it was D1X or Rebirth or whatever. Yeah, they had it so that weapons would look ahead 30 milliseconds and detonate if there was something up to 30 milliseconds in front of them. And this had all sorts of weird impacts on the game. But the biggest one is that whether homing missiles hit you or not really depended on what frame it did this check. And so sometimes you'd have homers that were, a third of a ship length away would snap to you and detonate. And sometimes they wouldn't go off till they hit your hull, and it was probabilistic, and that was extremely annoying.
Interesting.
It was most visible with Gauss Cannon in D2. I did some testing with Jinx, and he could get it so that he could make it detonate on your ship reliably and do no damage to you. That was bad. It actually turned out to be frame dependent. The lower your frame rate was, the less damage you took from Gauss, I think is the way it worked.
Okay.
Very
So
interesting.
yeah, that was evil.
That had to have been a bear to track down and even realize that it was a collision problem to begin with.
It actually was an interaction of two things. One of them was something that was introduced Rebirth era, and one of them was a bug that goes all the way back to the original D1 release in the Vector library.
The Descent 1 code has absolutely no bugs in it.
Well, those guys did pretty good math, but I found a math bug in their math libraries. I was actually rather proud of that.
Oh,
Did you ever run across a favorite comment in the code?
I was
from
just
the
about to ask that.
Descent 1 source? Anything that you can remember? I mean, there's a lot of real gems in there.
My favorite comment is in the code where robots are trying to aim and they're trying to lead a player. And they do some terrible math and they don't get it right. And the comment says, "This is why we write video games instead of guided missiles, like real missiles."
The missile knows where it is at all times. It knows this because it knows where it isn't.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah. So robots don't lead you very well, and it's because they're not smart enough to write code that actually works for that.
Well, thank you very much for humoring my retro questions.
That's nice. The one last thing I wanted to touch on with retro is that there was development on a observatory mode. Can you go into that? What happened with it? Where the code is currently, stuff of that nature.
It was a project that Jinx was actually doing, and he got a proof of concept out, but it had some issues that would make it inappropriate for competitive play. And so I had always intended to work on it with him, and never got around to it. That's where it is right now. I intend to work on it, and I haven't gotten around to it yet.
What issues remain with it?
Probably the biggest one is that the way it's implemented is you're supposed to join the game and then go into observer mode and you can pop in and out of it, which is really kind of inappropriate. You'd rather be able to join the game as an observer.
Right. That's the way that Descent 3 worked, is that you join the game and then decide to go to observer mode while you're there. Were you able to get to, when you're an observer, is no clip on?
That's another thing I would like to do. Jinx's version didn't have that, no.
Okay, so it's pretty much almost identical to Descent 3 then, in terms of observer mode.
Just an
Been a while. I
issue.
haven't thought about it much.
Yeah. The bad thing about observer mode in Descent 3 is that as soon as you go into observer mode, you drop you drop your missiles and shield orb, which is like that's kind of pointless.
Right.
You don't wanna drop that
You know,
for a
to do it
competitive scene.
properly, we would need to develop it with the community and really think about, how you should join, what should happen, how to make it appropriate for ladder matches, and how to handle security questions and all kinds of stuff like that.
Interesting. Yeah, that's a very interesting possibility that to be able to get observer mode. Observer modes are actually quite popular when there's a few people around. I know I've had a few people sitting up in observer watching me throw fusion back and forth with Watts, and I have a couple fun videos of Morphot and Melvin and all kinds of fun stuff.
I'm certain that you, Dracona, have a full appreciation for observer mode. You've helped build some of the observatory levels that are currently out and available for people to use, and that's a small library as it is.
All the good ones.
Yeah.
How much aggravation is it to put together an observer mode level?
It depends on the level. UG took me about 20 minutes. Logic took me about 13 hours.
Oh,
Ooh,
yuck.
man.
13 hours just to make Logic Observatory. Well, I
Yeah.
have to say that we absolutely appreciate your efforts, because I've had a lot of fun being able to, spy from the ceiling, watching some really good players play.
And
Oh, it is fun.
That's what makes us so enthusiastic for having an observatory mode as a potential possibility, is because otherwise there's only a handful of those capable with the Descent Mission Builder programs and Devil and the like, to be able to construct something that arduous, depending on the level, as you say.
Indeed. And the other thing, of course,
it's a crying need.
right. And the other thing, of course, is that some levels wouldn't even work with this. I'm like, take Junebug, for instance. There's some places on the map where you could be in one of 3 different levels. It'd be very hard to do a proper observatory for Junebug because you might not see them half the time.
That's right.
Another issue are maps like Black Rose, where if you try to build the observer mode, you end up using too many. It wasn't too many cubes. It was too many walls. The wall limit is like 175, and Black Rose OBS had like over 200. I actually made an attempt to fix it. I did get it under 175, but you still zone in and start spinning around.
And if I recall correctly, there was a similar issue with Athena Spy.
Ooh.
Oh, that version didn't use reactor cubes to limit missile spawns.
So all the missiles went upstairs.
Yeah, but the reactor cubes, I imagine you can just. That's just a flag. You can just change that and.
Yeah, but there's a limit. You can only put about 50 of them in a level, so you have to be very strategic with where you put them.
Interesting.
But they affect all the adjacent cubes. You have to be careful not to affect downstairs and get upstairs covered. It's a little geometry problem.
Now it becomes clear why it's 13 hours of work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's pretty crazy. I did end up getting Black Rose to work in Descent 2, but that has a higher wall limit. So it's just challenging to be able to do this, and it just puts an underscore under the need for a proper observatory mod or just a new feature to the game, because it's really exciting to watch 2 people flying around, getting in their heads. You can see what each one's thinking. When someone comes behind them, that's the exciting moment right there. You know someone's about to get wrecked, and it's really cool to have, and hopefully we can get something like that soon. And like I said, the Rebirth project is putting something like out there. Of course, that wouldn't translate very well over to Retro at this point, depending, of course, on how they do it. So that might be something that I don't know. We'd have to look at in the future, see how they implement it, because they're also working on homing missiles and a couple other things too. So.
Well, good for them.
So we've had a good discussion of Dracona, the youthful, just getting into Descent player, Dracona, the origami expert, Dracona, the ladder programmer, and code maintainer for the competitive distribution of Descent. What about Dracona, the player? When did you actually start getting into, say, you know what, I am going to embrace competitive Descent on a way that I've never done it before?
Oh, 2013. I never really did in the previous era. I always tried very hard to be good, but I didn't enjoy ladder play. But I had a reputation as one of the handful of girls who were good at the game. But it wasn't until the modern era that I started really wanting to play. And I think it was the opportunity to play against Jedi Luke, who I had always really looked up to as a pilot. And I thought, I want to actually get to where I can challenge this guy. So I was like, yeah, I have a second chance at this. I didn't think there would be another Descent era. So I was like, I'm going to do it. I'm going to work really hard. And I'm going to play really hard. See how good I can be.
Pretty cool. And you've gotten pretty darn good. I remember.
So are you?
Yeah, I remember playing you at the LAN, and that was an experience. Like I think we did Junebug, and I'm good at that level. I only got 3 on you. It's like wow. So.
I love Junebug.
Just another thing that we really should note here is the remarkable series that you have with Jedi Luke. What inspired you to take on one of the best, if not the best, in the modern era for such a grueling punishment of how many? There has to be hundreds and hundreds of games against this guy.
Gosh, it was about 500 last time I looked. I like difficult games. I'm a glutton for punishment. No, when I came back, he was actually having trouble getting games. Nobody would play him because he was so good. And nowadays, he gets lots of games because he's so good, and people really want to experience it. So it's been a change in the times. But I was really excited to have the opportunity to play him at all. So I played him a whole bunch, and we got to be really good friends. And, after a while, playing somebody who's really good, who's a really good friend, is just a good experience. And so it just kind of took on a life of its own at that point, I would say.
Just to give you an idea of how one-sided this series is, Dracona has 17 wins. Jedi Luke has 544.
That's
Man.
about right.
Oh dear.
That's on the ladder. I think we've played about as many again off the ladder.
Oh man, it's showing the average score is 20 to 11, with the closest match, of course, happening a month or so back in Crimson X2.
I remember that was a good game.
Longest overtime match ever, 34-32.
But this rivalry has gone through a lot of evolutions. Very early on, I was just this new pilot that he could get games with, but didn't really matter. Mm-hmm. And then for a while, he had taken me under his wing to teach me and try to make me a better pilot. And then as I got better, it became a little bit more if I was a threat to him, and he enjoyed the games because of that.
Mm-hmm.
What are the more surprising things that you have discovered about yourself and about your sparring partner Jedi Luke and other pilots as you gained skill in the game from all of those games?
I think the thing that has surprised me the most is the degree to which getting good at a high level depends on what I would call character traits. Mental toughness and the ability to focus and the ability to recover from bad hits. I had thought it would always just be very technical. But your technical skills can only take you so far, and going farther requires heart. I think that surprised me.
Very cool. Of course, you play some other games as well, and Lothar Bot wanted me to bring up NetHack. Do you have any? Yeah, you said you like hard games. There you go, NetHack.
Yeah, that's one of the hardest games in the world.
Yes. So, what experiences do you take from those games, and what do you bring into competitive Descent from that?
There are actually a few games that I play to make me better at Descent. I play an arcade game that you've never heard of called QuadNet, that is just kind of a reflex dodging game, and that just helps me learn to go into a dodging zone. NetHack is a game about making 1,000 decisions, all of them right, not making a single mistake. And I play it to teach myself caution and to teach myself to think through everything. One of the things NetHack players say is slow down, think clearly. And I'm such an aggressive player in Descent. Sometimes I say that to myself, slow down, think clearly. And if I'm getting to where I'm rushing the guns all the time or rushing my opponent too much, I will go play a game of NetHack to remind myself to be cautious.
Interesting. That's a very nice skill to have. Now, of course, the other thing that he brought up in chat here was that you had an atheist wish list Genulus NetHack Ascension.
Yes! I have an Ascension that was actually impressive on RGRN. Most people don't have one of those.
I don't have a single Ascension. I died in the Earth plane. I was like,
oh, that's
so
unfortunate.
sad. Yeah. And it was like one of those things where the guys were only hitting me for one, but I couldn't kill them. So I was like, yeah, I kind of screwed up. So, whoops, couldn't get out. It was just whatever. Yeah, very cool.
NetHack is such a hacking game. You know, if you're a programmer and you have that hacking mentality, it's really a good exercise.
All right, I'm going to move forward here. Start talking about the DCL itself. What brought you to create it?
The lack of a ladder.
Wow.
When I came back, there wasn't a ladder. You know, there was actually a lot of focus on Ranger games. And Rangers had a lot of camaraderie, and it was a lot of fun to be in. But it didn't have a good support structure for extremely competitive players. You know, players who want to see all the stats and they want to know who's better than who in what circumstances, down to the last iota. Yeah, they want to be able to pull out things like, you know, my rivalry with Jeds is 17 to 543, right? The Rangers didn't do any of that stuff. And so we needed a ladder. There was a group of us, I would say 5 or 7 of us, that really liked to play one-on-one games. But there wasn't any way to track it, and there wasn't a really good sense of who was how good. You just kind of play this game and you'd get a score, and, you know, maybe you'd report it as a Rangers game, and nothing came of it.
Right.
So, I had just played one of these silly little 1v1s with Jeds at one point in D-Box, and we got done with it, and I said, you know, we really need a ladder. He said, yeah, we really need a ladder, and we decided to build one.
All right. And
that's really all about there is to tell it. I mean, we spent a couple of months designing it and coming up with the rating algorithm and, you know, figuring out what kind of stats, what kind of features we were going to have.
Yeah,
we launched it at DKH's LAN that year. Good times.
Nice. That was the other thing I was going to ask is, you know, there was the 3 tiers, of course, gold, silver, bronze, and that's kind of evolved over time, even though you only see the 3 tiers. And can you explain how that was brought into being?
It's certainly
Sure.
very unorthodox.
Well, we really liked the system on IDL where if you beat somebody, you take their rank. You know, that just seems very appropriate. I'm not going to explain it. We really like it. But the tiering kind of helps set expectations, right? If you're going to play somebody who's much, much better than you, you probably should have realistic expectations going into it or you're going to have a miserable time. The tiers were originally designed as this group of people is reasonably competitive against each other. If you're in the same tier, the ladder expects you, it was originally designed, the ladder expects you to be able to get 13 points on the person who's at the top of the tier, which we think is kind of like the line of no hope, right? If you're expected to get 10 points, you're probably never going to win, but if you're expected to get 13, you might win once in a while. So the idea is that these are groups of people that any one of them can threaten any other one. How many there were going to be, we didn't actually know. When I ran the algorithm on some old IDL data, it came out with there are 7 tiers, you know, 7 groups of people that are, you know, from the bottom to the top. When we ran it on UF data, we got 2 tiers. But since we only had like a dozen pilots playing 1v1s at the time, we were like, well, I don't think a tier is going to work very well unless it's 5 pilots. So let's just, you know, we'll start with 2. And we actually started with 3 because we thought, well, we might get some bronze pilots eventually. But when we launched the ladder, we really didn't have any bronze pilots. It was all gold and silver. Because that's just how many pilots we had and how far down from the top of the game. As time has gone on, the top has gotten better, and the bottom has, I won't say it's gotten worse, but it's gotten more populous. We've had a lot of people joining the game.
I won't say
mostly a bronze ladder, right?
Yeah, I won't say it's gotten worse. I will say that there's a lot of interest in Descent recently. And we'll get to that too.
So, you know, the skills in bronze goes all the way to the bottom, and it might not stay that way forever. If we get enough people in it and a wide enough division in skills, we might introduce another one farther down there. Hey, we'll see.
Interesting. And then, of course, recently you came out with the promotion challenges. Can you explain how that came about?
Well, there had been a problem with the ladder going way back that you would get promoted or demoted, and people would be like, is that for real, or is that going to go away in 2 games, right? Because sometimes people would get promoted and we'd be like, I don't think so, let's play some games, and, you know, beat them back down to whatever tier they had been before.
The welcoming hug from gold.
Exactly, right? The welcome to gold beatdown, we called it. And it was a very informal thing, and some people really liked it. When it happened to me, I had a blast. It was exactly what I was looking forward to. I had a lot of fun with it. Some people really didn't like it. They would get promoted and they weren't expecting it, and then you know, all the games with the really tough pilots was not something they were looking for, and there was some bad blood. I think the triggering issue was when it happened to Mo, he really didn't want to be promoted. And then when people came to play him, he didn't really enjoy those games. He didn't feel like he belonged. We're like, okay, we need a bright line between the tiers, something that you cross and you're really on the other side of it and there's no question, right? So we talked a little bit about how to design that, but institutionalizing the informal beatdown welcome seemed like the most DCL thing to do. And on top of that, there has always been some questions about this rating algorithm, like how does it work and what score do I have to get? And people have been really nervous, like if I get a bad score, am I going to get demoted in one game? So I thought, okay, we'll make it so that you can tell what's going to happen and what the expectations are, and you can know that you're safe until you're not.
Right.
So just kind of a lot of things came together.
I have to say that I think that the concept has done an enormous amount for simply the activity on the ladder. People
I know.
are excited to go and take a look at what has happened. Had they played that third match yet? What
They're
was the
little
score?
tournaments. They're a lot of fun.
Yeah, that's the best part about it. Like little mini gauntlets. You have to play these 5 matches, and depending on how you do, you get promoted or not. Now, there's only been one series where the pilot did not get promoted, and this would be Watts, and he turned around a month later and just came in there and he just killed it. So it's very cool to see the evolution of how this works. Are there any plans to make any tweaks to them?
Well, the rules on DCL, it's kind of a living ladder, right? So I'm sure there will be tweaks. I don't know that there are any active plans.
Interesting. Yeah, I gotta tell you, the demotion series has been just as exciting as the promotion series.
I know!
Behemoth, just this last series, I mean, we talked about this as the highlight of the week, too, was the match where he played, and he brought it to Jedi Luke and Nysa. He requested Nysa. And
it was Nysa X2, to be honest.
Yeah.
Even so.
So
I know. It
That's
really lets you
pretty
see
awesome.
what kind of a competitor somebody is.
Indeed, yeah. Behemoth was not taking the cheap way out, and you got to give him a lot of respect for that. So, very cool. And then, of course, Rethink just, he got demoted to silver before we had this in effect, and then he turns around and, he comes back, he does his promotion series, and then knocks off number 1 within a couple of days of coming back. I mean, it's just...
And held it for 3 days. Sorry, for 3 matches.
Yeah, I mean, it's just awesome to see this kind of thing. It really... I think it's upped the competition on the ladder, and I'm hoping that a lot of people that haven't been playing for a while come and see this, and they'll say, "Oh, hey, this is pretty cool," and join in pretty much. So hopefully it will help with that.
Rethink has had hot and cold periods throughout his entire career. I think of him as like this Cthulhu of a pilot. Like most of the time he's sleeping, but when he wakes, like he just lays waste to everything.
Oh yeah, exactly. That's funny. So the last thing I wanted to touch with you on, of course, that you're involved pretty heavily with the Descent Underground project in terms of you're one of the what do they call that tier? It's not the underground.
6 degrees of access?
6 degrees of access, is that what they call it?
I think so. That's the one that let us go down to the dev studio and work on the game.
Awesome. How was that experience, by the way?
It was a lot of fun. The team was really good people, and we got a lot of good design discussions done, and got to talk about things and kind of see eye to eye on how to do things. So it was a good experience.
Pretty neat. Now, since then, of course, that they've been doing a lot of different things. They took out Tricorning, added it back. They're adding different game modes. At this point, what would you say your overall impression of where they're headed is? And you can take this as from the view of a Descent 1 pilot or a new game, however you want to.
I was afraid you were going to ask me this.
Oh, dear.
I'm really the wrong person to ask. I have kind of backed off from Underground a lot to focus more on DCL and Retro. I feel like a lot of the forum posts I made describing how D1 works and what's necessary to make a good Descent, I feel like I kind of did what I could for them, and then, it's up to them what to do with that information.
Right.
I stopped playing it a lot when I was just kind of disappointed with how the mechanics of the flight worked and the dogfighting, and especially the hitboxes issue. I I am a very picky pilot. You know, I'm one of those pilots that can't stand D2 and won't give the time of day to D3. And so there was always a question of whether Underground was going to be a game that I liked. Yeah, I'm an ally of the community, and I hope they do well, and I hope we have a lot of crossover for pilots. But I'm not sure it's going to be for me. But we'll see. You know, we'll see. But my husband Tom would really be the one to ask about that because he stays up to date on that project, and I really don't anymore.
Yeah, I do. I do keep tabs on it every once in a while. Of course, my biggest issue with it is the movement, the flight being permissible client server in net games, and that's something they're tied to with the engine that they chose. And
that's right.
I mean that messes with aim. That messes with a whole lot of things. And then on top of that, you mentioned the hitbox issue. I know that White Shark is really put together a pretty decent series of videos demonstrating just what the problem is, and hopefully that they'll at least knock that one out. But
they seem pretty reactive to the community, but there are some technical constraints that I don't know. I'm not sure it'll ever be the game for a D1 pilot, but I have hope. We'll see.
Yeah. So it's it's hopefully they'll come around to this. I mean, but. Yeah, I really like the concept behind Descent Underground. It's definitely awakened the genre, I think. Even though we're kind of in a renaissance of the whole 6th Degree genre, going all the way back to Minor Wars 2081. Even though that was a bad game, that kind of I see that game as kind of jump starting the whole thing, where we got games like Neon Excesses, Talon, Retrovirus, and I'm missing one here. Sub-Level Zero. So this is
Underground has brought in a lot of excitement and a lot of pilots, and the D1 community has helped them a lot with a lot of expertise and a lot of help in getting things right. The way I put it is these two communities are not the same community, but they're strong allies.
Right. Yeah, that's the best part about it is with the exception of Minor Wars 2081, mind you, a lot of the games have been very. People have been very receptive. Of course, Geocore too. I forgot about that one. I played that one in multiplayer once, and that was actually a blast. It doesn't have the best graphics in terms of the weapons. I think the Descent 1 weapons right now look better than Geocore's, but it plays very well. And we got these big projects like Descent Underground. We got these open source ports of the Descent 1 source. We got the commercial independent games like Sub-Level Zero, Neon Excesses, and we got these little one-man studios, and Neon Excesses is another example of a one-man studio, and Geocore as well. It's really cool to see the genre pop alive again, and I do not hesitate at taking, if there's a 6th Degree Freedom game coming out, I will own it at some point. So it's very cool to see this whole revival. So yeah, very cool. Unless is there anything you wanted to add?
I can grill her for one more series of questions.
Going through the Morphod gauntlet here.
Oh dear. Let's make it. I can't think. I don't think I can limit it to 3, but like top 5 Descent pilots in your experience of all time.
Ooh.
Could you name them?
Are we talking about skills or influence?
Yes.
Oh, yes. Oh, okay. Okay.
Most impactful. Let's put it that way. That way you can do both.
Kill the Syrian, Jedi Luke, me. I gotta think about number 5.
So that's Kill the Syrian, Jedi Luke, yourself, and a yet to be determined number 5. What was that, Ronkley?
I don't think Jedi Luke included himself in his top 5.
Well,
because he's humble that way.
Well, he's good enough to be humble. But
yeah, but he's wrong. He's been extremely influential in the modern era, and as a pilot, was extremely influential in the previous era.
Yeah, most people would argue aggravating, but there's something to be aggravating about somebody who beats you all the time.
I think I'm going to give number 5 to Glock 21.
Very good. Yeah, it's
good, solid, old school decision there.
Yep. It's interesting because I think if you ask this question,
pilot whose philosophies and pilots were before my time, but were really definitive in the era that I came up under, and so I think he did a lot to define the philosophy that we fly with. Things like share the knowledge, compete on execution. That comes from him.
That's a very nice quote too. It's if you find it's interesting how you'll play someone on the DCL, and instead of going back to lick your wounds and figure out what you did wrong, 90% of the time, if somebody sees something that you're doing wrong, they'll let you know, and it's really interesting that how close knit that makes the community, and it raises the skill of everyone.
Yeah, as you play in some other games, and the response to you screwing up is, "LOL, get good." That's not productive, especially with a community that is as small a number as ours.
Or if you're
Yeah,
playing
we
League of
have
Legends,
a really
it's uninstall.
we have a really special little community, and its philosophies are a lot closer to traditional pilots and to like a martial arts dojo than they are to modern gaming. And people who aren't part of the community don't understand it. And it's been that way for a long time. That goes back to IDL and back to Glock 21 and Karash and people who really saw the community that way. And we have done our best to continue this with DCL and make it kind of a special study of the game together, and not really just a lulz I won kind of community.
And so far, so good. Anything else you have, either Morphod or Dracona?
No, that was my hardest question that I ask any Descent pilot when we have them on interview is who they thought were the best or the most influential pilots.
That's
So
a really good
I can
question.
explain why I thought those were the best pilots, but yeah,
well,
good.
certainly Syrian for his level influence, and
No kidding.
my goodness, he wrote novels.
Syrian did a lot. He did a lot to define the philosophy of the game in its middle era, and he ran IDL, and he was an excellent pilot himself. Always a great advocate for trying different styles and holding the community together. His work with Rangers has stood the test of time. There's a lot to say about him. Kiln is a community leader and one of the original great pilots, a very iconic guy. Glock 21 was one of the original greats, and very much set some of the philosophical foundations for the community. I named myself mostly for all the stuff in the modern era, DCL and retro, and I'm a pretty good pilot, so I think I've had a big influence on the game in the modern era.
Yeah, that's something
And,
we cannot disagree with. It's just the amount of effort that you've put into not just for the DCL but for retro as well.
And Jed's has been kind of a sensei to the modern era. He's trained a lot of people. He's a very good pilot. He's done a lot of behind the scenes work in terms of setting the philosophy for the community and thinking about what kind of a game competitive pilots will like and what will appeal to them. So he's had a huge kind of invisible influence. So he has to make the list.
All right, very good.
Thank you for expounding on that.
I think someone had a question, but I haven't seen the question yet, so we may get back to that in a second. Let's just very quickly go through the news that we have. There's not a whole lot. Of course, Descent Underground starts streaming again. Their Wingman's Hangar and the Design Underground stuff. They started streaming the Hot Rocks game, the internal build that they have for that. I didn't catch it, but the way they make it sound, it's kind of like a cross between soccer and rugby, which seems...
When you got 6 degrees of freedom, then that gets really confusing.
Yeah, because the idea is they didn't want somebody to hold the ball or whatever they call it, the rock, and just fly into the goal. So if you hold it after a certain amount of time, you start taking damage, and eventually it explodes.
So it's kind of like a shot clock.
Yeah, pretty
in a sense,
much.
but it's a pass clock. You just have to get rid of it.
Right,
Hot
you
potato.
just get rid of hot rock. Yeah, exactly. And then, of course, the soccer part is when you get rid of it, you could like shoot it in the goal for... I think it's very much like the old Unreal Tournament mode where you had the ball that you shot through a goal, or you could run through the goal for more points. So, yeah. So there's that. They also have mentioned that they're potentially organizing a tournament soon. Now, they haven't put out any details. They're looking for community feedback as to what kind of tournament would be good. I've actually thought of doing one myself, but yeah, that I just haven't had the time to put anything like that together. I think it would be like really neat as a relation to that. I participate in something called Condor, which is a Crypt of the Necrodancer racing league, and they do this thing where you have to stream to play, and what they do is that the host gets the stream of both of those players, puts it up, and streams that out so that you can see both views at the same time. So you can see them racing pretty much live. And with my experience with observer mode, I think something like that would just be fantastic in Descent, and that would be like the kind of thing that I would like to do. So, yeah, that would be very interesting to see what they do. How big of an impact they do that they make with the community with a tournament like that. I mean, if they just make it a tournament and they put something up on Challenge and just do that, I don't think that'll be a big thing. But if they start streaming this stuff, I think that's going to bring a lot of people into the game. So, yeah, I think that's all I had for Descent Underground. And of course, the last thing, we have a follow-up on the situation between Parallax and Interplay. Not a whole lot to add, but this has hit Kotaku. There is an article over on Kotaku where they have an email interview with Matt Toshlag regarding the ongoing litigation, I guess, between Parallax and Interplay. The main complaint being that Interplay owes Parallax tens of thousands of dollars for sales that they've done on GOG.com and maybe Steam. I still am not 100% clear on why it's still up on Steam, but maybe someone with that information can step forward. So, but anyway, there's that. And of course, the question from chat,
You're able to look
Dakota,
at that.
and it's in capital letters. When will the next retro release happen?
Real soon now.
TM?
Is that also a response in capital letters? Real soon now.
For those of you who aren't programmers, real soon now means anytime.
Yes, like anytime.
I keep putting off working on it. I really need to work on it.
No.
So when I darn
know how
well
that
feel
feels.
like it.
The response
Yeah,
from
that's
chat
fair
was,
enough. And you guys are pushing the observer mode pretty hard, and I'm like, yeah, it's a big need. Yeah, we need to work on that.
yeah, the response from chat was, hooray, sarcasm.
We'll take a couple guesses who it is.
I've been meaning to work on it for a long time, and at this point, there's no point in making promises. I'll do my best. Okay.
Yeah, that's the thing with programming. Why you get that kind of thing is because the moment you make a promise is when you miss it.
No, I had been working real actively on it, and then DU came out and distracted me, and then this LAN came out and distracted me, and I had some personal issues for a few months, and that's all behind me. So actually, it looks really good. I could work on it right now. I could work on it this weekend. I should do that.
Hey, there we go. All right. So, very cool. We're going to go into our regular segments here. Of course, the last 2 weeks, we've heard about Rebirth and Retro and where those stand, so nothing to add there. As far as the Descent Rangers go, they actually hosted their first event of 2016. It was the Gloves Come Off D2 event, where something to understand with the Rangers is the Descent Rangers do not like a lot of the weapons in Descent 2. They turn off all the new primaries, with the exception of Gauze. They turn off...
They keep laser sixes.
Oh, they keep laser sixes, that's right. They turn off the smart mines, a whole bunch of different things. They play on Ace instead of Insane. Well, that was all out the window. The only thing disabled was Earthshakers, and I actually played in a couple of those matches before the podcast, and I don't know, it's a little frustrating because, Anarchy Games, X1 primaries, you know how that goes. You're flying around with lasers while this guy's got an Omega cannon that kills you in half a second. So, but I mean, it's still a lot of fun to play the games. And the next event is going to be a co-op. That's going to be next week at noon Pacific, 3 Eastern. They'll be playing the Revenge Odravis. I also wanted to point out, I saw something that the Revenge Odravis 2 level pack is coming out soon. So that's should be interesting to see, because Revenge Odravis pretty... It's pretty hard. I played a few levels of that. I couldn't finish it myself, but it's pretty fun to play.
So for those who are unfamiliar, these are third-party co-op missions that are, if you enjoyed the original Descent First Strike or the Descent 2 single-player campaign, and you're just looking for more Descent, from my understanding, Dravis has quite the evil level designer there. Or are these levels, are they able to be played single player, or are they
Yes.
explicitly designed for co-op?
They're single player.
They're single player. They can be
And
played
co-op.
co-op.
Okay,
I
so
am a
I could
breathless
imagine.
fan.
I can
Yes.
imagine some cases where like there's no way to beat this unless you have like 3 people. So
Oh no,
maybe
no,
that's
no,
a
it's single
Oh,
player.
you can play it single player just fine.
all
I've
right.
done it. I did my first run. I did end to end on Insane in single player, and I survived on my last life.
Oh my god, I have such a problem playing on anything past Hotshot. It's crazy. So very cool. And then of course we have DCL action, where we had Jedi Luke retaking the top spot from Mark 392 with a very convincing 20-13 score. Um, good job to Jedi for that. Is there anything you had to?
I have a lot of
this week? You have
DCL
a
stuff
lot of
here. I have
DCL
some
stuff.
people. I have some people say that they were very disappointed at the amount of DCL news coverage in the last week. That's because we had a very special guest. But I imagine we'll take a little extra time today. We'll still take a light touch on what gold and silver has done. And my focus this week is going to be on bronze because that's what I had time to do because I got stuff to do. Anyway, as far as gold, most of gold's activity with the beginning of early 2016 season has been against silver, and the type of record you would expect between gold pilots and silver has been otherwise maintained. But there are some still remarkable gold on gold highlights. Highlight of the week is going to be Jedi Luke and Rethink. I believe that was in Flea X5, a 21-19 game with a hilarious war journal up on the DCL. If you have the opportunity, swing by and read that. Rethink pulling ahead there, for giving Jedi Luke's sole loss for the season. Otherwise, Jedi Luke on a 10-win gold streak.
You know, the last time we mentioned a Jedi Luke gold streak on this podcast, do you remember what happened?
There has not been a gold streak for Jedi Luke. You have not heard anything. But as far as rectifying that loss in overtime to Rethink, Jedi Luke turned around and did a 20-4 win against Rethink in Logic X2. We were talking Rethink. He can be really hot or really cold, but he's never in between. An absolute example of that. Outside of that, I know that Mark 392 had mysteriously retired for a short bit, but couldn't last a single week. Had to come back. Has a 3-2 record and still has not bested Jedi Luke, but has put up a couple good games against the like of Rethink and Dracona and company. Other than that, there hasn't been too much as far as gold on gold activity, other than Jedi Luke reigning at the top and doing a good job of keeping everyone else in check.
Speaking of gold,
And
do you know
again,
who I see
what's up?
in gold? Do you know who I see at the 53rd position on the ladder right now?
Hold on here. I'm going to scroll down. Oh my goodness.
No, I don't know.
That's right.
I don't
That is
know if this
DJ
was like,
CJR.
Yeah, it is. I don't know if he's actually going to play, but it's kind of a.
Well, it was an administrative decision, I believe. Dracona, are you still with us?
Yeah, what?
Do you have any idea how this administrative decision of unretiring DJ CJR came to be?
I didn't do it.
You didn't do it?
I don't know who did it
I
actually.
can hear your smile from here.
I actually think the way the thread played out is that DJCGR actually hit the unretire button. That's why I'm like, I don't know if he's actually going to play, but he's been around and chatting and whatnot. So we'll see. We'll see.
We'll see if he has the time to pop in. I know that whenever he does show up, it doesn't matter how long he's been away. He always brings the game ready to play.
Yep.
So, other than that, Gold, you need to play each other more because I don't have much to report on here other than, domination and domination.
Sorry, my bad.
Dropping down to silver tier for the early 2016, we have P-Funk playing mostly bronze players to start off with, but he's got a 10 win streak against bronze with a high game of 18-20 against somebody whose jimmies are Russell in Logic, showing that it's not just domination of bronze, he can also hang with the guys in silver.
He's just undefeated against bronze because he hasn't played me yet.
I see. Well, there's a little bit of call out there. You see Bird Dog and Hyena going with a 3-game series. It's pretty close. 2 overtime games. Bird Dog taking the top on Iowa and Descend. But Hyena with a surprising 20-12 win over Bird Dog in UGG. Bird Dog, very proficient fusion user. But Hyena also very capable as well. So very surprising results there. Would have expected an overtime match. But no, there's a distinct, clear-cut victory there. Continuing on, the Hyena 13 wins, has a 13-game win streak against bronze, and has been on an excellent series with Behemoth, including getting a dark horse 2018 in NISA, and other highlights, including a win over 2017 over Melvin in Lurk, and solid performances against Sirius. I think I could see Melvin sulking right now. Ryusei 117 did a 3-game series with Cyrus, dropping 15, 12, and 16 to start off the series. Hopefully we see a bit more of him. And Melvin starting the season pretty flat against certain silver players, but has put up competitive games with a nasty series against yours truly. He's held me to 13 and 12 in Logic games.
Nice.
Claims he had an epiphany. I still haven't figured out what it is, and it's irritating me most thoroughly.
Interesting. Yeah,
Cyrus.
Logic is one of those levels that, it just seems that some people have figured it out. I'm not one of them.
Well, Logic's supposed to be one of my stronger levels, but I don't know what he does. He's got a spread fire is just suddenly become very nasty, and I can't hit him even on land. It's aggravating.
Oof.
Cyrus, since the beginning of the season, has already played 80 matches.
Jeez.
This is also with him saying, "Oh, I can't play because my hand hurts, guys."
Yeah,
that lasted, I think, 36 hours.
Yeah, a day and a half off.
So
which
80
is,
matches.
Which is a long time for him.
Yeah, 80 matches, 33 against Jedi Loot, which is like shoving your hand in a meat grinder, and has already put up dark horses against Behemoth and Sirius. Has 3 wins against Sirius, both Behemoth, Sirius Gold pilots, and a competitive overtime game against Bahamut, 20-22 in Crimson. Other people we've seen some action out of: Entropy, Warmaster. I see.
Before you move on, I do want to mention that match against Behemoth because I did see that on the tracker. Cyrus had a 19-17 lead in that, if I remember right. It was either 19-17 or 19-18. He was 1 kill from winning. Before that
for the Bahamut game or the Behemoth game?
Bahamut.
Okay, gotcha. So Bahamut was able to bring it back from a 2-point deficit to go into overtime and win. Got it.
That was. I thought he was going to pull it off for a minute, but he brought it back. That's what gold does.
That's
Just saying,
yeah. The performance under pressure is really what separates the gold and the silver tier.
Yeah.
I think so.
We've seen some action out of Entropy and Warmaster. I don't know what we call him anymore. He's currently labeled as Japan, but Face.
I've just started calling him by his first name.
Ernie? Okay, yeah. Well, he raised a little of a fit last time. Naphtha, we've seen around. That's a name we haven't seen on DCL, but he's been around in the Rangers. Along with Ice Wolf.
I learned that Naphtha is responsible for that mess known as Zenith.
That is correct. Naphtha did make the level Zenith, if I recall correctly, and that is just an absolute terror of a disorientation level. While I absolutely respect Zenith, I would be entirely enthusiastic if devilish levels like that didn't continue to be made. And we also heard some a little bit from Watts at the end of last season. Hasn't showed up this season, but probably the most significant silver sighting that we've had is Zero. Zero has popped in. He hasn't unretired, but he's played a number of exhibition games and has proven that he still has what it takes to be competitive on the ladder if he would only hit that unretire button. That more or less wraps up silver from my end.
Yeah, Zero is very heavily involved with Descent Underground. He is one of Descent Underground's top pilots. And he's very often, whenever I go to play, he's usually playing. And he's very frustrating to play against. He's worse in DU than D1. It's very difficult playing against him. So that's where he's been.
And if other than that, I've got a new feature that I'd like to do over the next few weeks. I have capsules for players on the ladder. Start with just bronze right now. I just wanted to talk a little bit about the individual players. I'm just going to rattle this off real fast. Poke in comments when you can. Feel free to interrupt me. We'll start from the bottom. We got the newcomers. We got the lower tier of bronze here. We got Maestros popping in at the middle of December with a high game showing of 17-20 against Avatar before winter break. He hasn't been back yet, but hopefully once he gets settled into the new semester after his winter break, we'll see more of him. He's got to focus more on his flying, more about his movement than his positioning. His positioning is already pretty good. Then we move on to Can I Play Dad? Can I Play Dad started playing late December, has shown marked improvement in his flying, and has finally broken into the double digits against his favorite sparring partner of Swarthy, high game 15-20 in Flea. He definitely plays up well against DCL newcomer Apo in what is developing to a very intense series. The last 4 games decided by 2 points. Last 2 were in overtime. He's an exciting player, fast and eager for development, and is also a glutton for punishment, does not refuse games from anybody. He's got to focus on his positioning and his spew management, and he's improving very well with his missile management. I think we have the developing for a potential X4 player here.
Uh-oh.
And rounding up the lower
X4!
tier. Yes. But maybe you need somebody to break him in there. And rounding out the lower tier of bronze is newcomer Apo, started playing in mid-December and has greatly improved his flying since the beginning of his career. He has respectable scores against Avatar and Swarthy, and has, of course, the intense series mentioned with Can I Play. He has a very strong Vulcan and fast flying, and with his new hard...
He has deadly Vulcan. He's got, I would call it silver level Vulcan. It's insane how much better his Vulcan is than the rest of his game. It's miles apart.
He's picked up new hardware for Christmas, and that is going to improve his consistency and a little bit of his latency. He's got to work on tri-quitting backwards, though, and spew rushing. He's a very aggressive charge pilot, and hopefully the overtime games with Can I Play will provide him a little bit of space to learn the openings. A lot of people are of the opinion overtime games are what make you better. So hopefully that provides opportunities for him to discover ways to improve his game.
Also, just pointing out, Lothar says that Can I Play Dad? That's a reference to Wolfenstein 3D's easiest level.
Does this mean he's going to change his name when he like moves up to silver someday?
Maybe.
Oh, that'd be interesting.
What are the other difficulty levels? Yeah, he's going to change his name to Don't Hurt Me, and then bring him on, and then I Am Death Incarnate. There you go.
I Am Death Incarnate would be an awesome gold pilot name.
Yes.
Okay, moving on to the mid-tier of bronze, we got Rooster 61, came into the DCL at the beginning of November, has quickly become one of the more exciting dogfighters in bronze. Past few weeks, he's posted excellent scores against Swarthy, Avatar, and Roncley. Highlights include overtime games for the dogfighting trophy, 30-28 win over Roncley, and the disorientation trophy, a 30-32 loss versus Swarthy. He's not afraid of a challenge, actively seeks out gold pilots, and has even said that he's almost completed his tour of gold. So gold pilots, you got somebody who wants to play you. Recommendations for Rooster this season: uses strong dogfighting as a basis to open opportunities to experiment and round out the rest of his game. You know, if someone's afraid of your dogfighting, they're going to not dogfight you. So what do? Well, you have that to fall back on. How do you chase your opponent and convince them to dogfight you instead? So I expect for him, at the way that he's playing, to start shooting for silver by the end of the season. Mr. Roncley, you had a bit of a tussle with Mr. Rooster over that. It was the fifth longest overtime match for that dogfighting trophy.
It was the fifth at the time. He since knocked that down.
Oh, yikes.
And that was the disorientation trophy in Active Pro when he lost 32-30. So he's now got not only the second and the sixth longest DCL games ever, he's also got the top two all bronze overtime games in terms of points. Which
definitely has the stamina to succeed on the ladder.
I remember my first overtime game against Jackie. I'm sure Lothar remembers that too. He was observing that one. I can tell you from experience, you learn win or loss from an overtime game.
Absolutely.
And it's not, you don't learn anything about dogfighting or ratting, about using weapons. You learn how to handle your nerves better. That's a big thing when you're playing competitively.
Okay, we got about 7 more to go through here. We have Swarthy in the mid-tier of bronze, joining up shortly before Halloween. He's played 150 matches to date.
And
kind of a sleeper there.
This season.
Right. So his enthusiasm, I think, has been absolutely critical to a critical asset to bronze tier, welcoming new players to the ladder. There's no shortage of matches available for anybody who's looking for stuff and just getting started. Highlights include the overtime disorientation match, 32-30 win over Rooster 61, and for the disorientation trophy, and Avatar with solid performances against the Silver Pilots, P-Funk and Kaina. For the time being, Swarthy, he's got to work on his speed. He's got to use tri-quitting more aggressively. I almost wonder if he's got auto-leveling on, honestly, with the way he flies. He should set his target for the top of bronze for the rest of the season. Continue working on his mind game to take advantage of his good positioning and his good missile management.
Yeah, the one game I also want to bring up is his game against me and Flea, where he held a 16-15 lead before I had to close it out. Before you rattled his bones. I was surprised with how well he did in that level, because he had not played me that close yet, and it was really weird because I consider myself to be pretty strong in Flea, and I felt I was playing an exceptionally good game, and he was hanging with me point for point for point almost the whole way. That's saying a lot. So he did really well in there.
I think we got some pretty exciting things to expect out of Swarthy in the future. Rounding out the mid-tier of bronze, we have Avatar, returned back on the scene after a brief absence from the end of the summer season. He's then since taken a firm foothold in this part of bronze, and he's recently assembled a Grendel adapter, moving over to his old Sidewinder from the Logitech.
Yeah, he's telling me about that. He's still kind of relearning.
Yeah, and since that, I've noticed, certainly, because he and I fly wacky, that he's adding more control to the way he flies, and he can really get in that dizzying dogfighting style. I feel much more at home than he could really turn into quite a force. He's already had good showings against Kaina and Warmaster. Like 2015 against Warmaster is not something that you casually go up to Warmaster and do. Once he gets his groove back with his Sidewinder, look for him to start making other silver pilots dizzy. He's got to work on tempo management. He's got to work on game change-ups, and also he needs to remember that there are indeed missiles in the level. And, and that rounds out the middle tier. We got 3 more pilots left. Can we last?
I don't know, can you?
All right, in the upper tier of bronze, we got Spud. After taking a few months off, Spud returned to the DCL for the whole of the late 2015 season. He's a well-rounded, very experienced player, and is handy with the fusion in a pinch, putting up very consistent scores against several silver pilots, including Watts and P-Funk, and attaining a personal streak against P-Funk before P-Funk was promoted. At this point, really, because he's experienced and well-rounded, Spud just needs to put in the matches and remember to have fun. Knowing when to have patience and when to shake loose and just go all out aggressive will unlock the next level of potential for him. Next is Lady Silver, who is aggression personified, which might be a problem, except she's actually really good at it.
She used to be really bad at it, and kind of the evolution of her game has been really aggressive and just get blown up. Okay, little more reserved, staying back, and trying to get some sneaky kills, and got better over time. And now that she's gotten better, her aggression has returned, and it's like 10 times as good as it ever was.
If you want an experience, play her in Crimson, her home. Throughout the late 2015 season, she's been one of the key players. Lady Silver Cyrus and Rethink promoting Crimson, and has now made the core list. If you want more an experience, you want a nightmare, play her in D3. Nearly snagged a Bronze Dark Horse victory over, was it at least 2 gold pilots by now?
Rethink and Behemoth.
Yeah, it's like 2015, 2018 or something like that.
It was 20 to 15 on Behemoth, I believe, and 21 to 19 on Rethink.
Oh,
yes.
She's held her own against and has bested Bronze's top and even some of Silver, racking up no less than 5 Dark Horses over Silver pilots in the last season. And has had quite a series with P-Funk. If Lady Silver keeps up her performances, she'll be running the Silver promotion gauntlet in no time. Till then, she's got to work on her mind game and the change-ups to capture the momentum, because when she does have the momentum, she knows how to kill it. And finally, just a little bit of praising our own Ronckley. Dropped down from Silver Bracket to commit to a new control scheme. No longer a toaster, Ronckley has recaptured his frightening fusion with his new mouse setup. Ronckley, source of quite a few overtime matches against the like of Lady Silver, Watts, Spud, and Rooster, and has recently accomplished a remarkable task. Yes, a Spud, actually. Yep, in fact, I had Spud written down. I just glossed right over that. Spud, you're tiny. Spud, play more matches so I can see you. Has recently accomplished the remarkable task of collecting all 7 bronze trophies. That's right, wow. Dogfight, X4, Fusion, Blind, Descent 2, and Disorientation trophies.
And I'll tell you, a couple of them were not easy.
Ronckley is just about on form with his new configuration, just needs to put in the time and the controls before his inevitable return to Silver, and I will tell you, I am looking forward so much.
I have a feeling that 2 of those matches will be against a certain Silver pilot with Russell.
I'll only need 1 to prove my point.
Oh, okay.
Ladies and gentlemen, that's the active pilots in bronze. Returners, we've seen some action from White Shark and Seaworm lately. I know that White Shark and Seaworm have poor connections that discourage them from putting in a few games, and also time zone differences for White Shark. I know that he's putting quite a bit of work in. I think somebody mentioned on the Descent Underground side. But hey, we like it when you're able to show up Just keep poking us around in the Rangers channel in the morning. We'll show up. We'll play some games eventually. And pilots that we have seen some action from, but we haven't heard from for, as far as ladder action in some time. SDF Jeff, PP Sky, Isabie, Sergeant Thorn, Skywarp, Ferno, Strife. Guys, come back, play, please. It's an exciting time to be in bronze. We've got new folks on the bottom. We've got some excellent and really nasty play on the upper end of bronze. So if you're looking to get in, now's an excellent time as always. And that is my capsule roundup of bronze for the beginning of the season. Next week, we'll be doing capsules of silver.
Very much fun to look forward to. That's a very interesting segment. I like that a lot. So, yeah, very cool. Of course, we mentioned the highlight of the week was the Rethink vs. Jedi Luke. 21-19. Rethink got the win on that, but the important thing to note, and the reason why I brought this up as a highlight, there were 5 suicides in that game. I only believe one of them was unintentional on Rethink's side. The reason I bring this up is this game showcases the level of competitiveness that the DCL has to offer. It could have been very easy for Jedi Luke to just say, okay, 17-13, let me just write this off. That's not what people do in this game. They are going to fight tooth and nail for every point they can get. And that's because every point matters. Do you want to speak on that very briefly about the whole every point matters, Dracona, if you're still there?
Yeah, I'm still here. The idea behind it is to give you something to shoot for that's a realistic goal, right? If you have gotten 9 on somebody in the past, you can try to get 10 in the next game, and that gives you something to fight hard for, even if you're against somebody who's much better than you. The rating algorithm has expectations, pilot versus pilot, so it'll say, I think this guy can get 13 on that guy, and if you overperform that, your rating goes up, even if you still lost the game. You don't know what those targets are, but you know that it always matters.
Indeed, yeah. That's the important thing here is, Jedi did not give up. He did not say end of game here. He made it to 19-18 with Rethink in the lead, and I think he had to have 4 suicides before bringing it into overtime. And that's just that's incredible. And that's the kind of play that really makes the DCL exciting to me when you have that type of strategy going on. I've been on the receiving end of that too, as Morphod well knows.
I think this mechanic is one of the things that has led to the renaissance of skills in the modern era. Mm-hmm. When we launched DCL over about 9 months, there was a sudden growth of skill in the community. The people who were on the ladder got much, much better than everybody else very fast. Mm-hmm. And I think it's that you're playing hard every kill, every game. It's great training.
Yeah. It's also been a strategy that I've been noticing, and only a very small handful of pilots employ this one, is suiciding while in the lead. The purpose of that is so that you and only you know where your spawn is, so that you can come quickly get it and take back control of the game. So it's not something I see very often. You do it to spite people. You just do it to, you can't get the kill.
Well, actually, it's because when I'm going against Vulcan heavy pilots and I want them to waste their ammo, I'll suicide, because I can beat them once their Vulcan's dead.
Yeah, there you go. All right.
So yeah, there are advantages for being in the lead and suiciding, and I've complained about it before. I've belly ached, but the matter is, if you're playing on that level, it's not against the rules. You're a jerk for doing it, but you're the jerk who won.
Yeah.
So
mm-hmm. That's right. So, So I guess that's gonna wrap things up this week. We got a lot of DCL stuff to look forward to, and I'm still kind of in the works to get some more people on, maybe from some other aspects of the game, and especially the Descent Underground universe. So hopefully we can have some more fun folks on as well. Let's go ahead and wrap things up.
All right, folks, if you've enjoyed our podcast this evening, or you just have some questions, concerns, comments, or confessions, we have a call for submissions. Please email us at selfdestructsequence.org. Be certain to mention whether or not you wish to remain anonymous in your contribution. Other contact info, we have Facebook. You can find us on Facebook. You can find us on Twitch at SDS Podcast. You can find us on Twitter, SDS_activated. And, of course, on selfdestructsequence.org if you can't remember anything else.
And, of course, we are so far holding to our podcast schedule for the year. We're going to be trying to go live at around 5:30 p.m. Eastern on Saturday. We were a little bit late this week because we had some technical issues to work through, but we made it through. And be sure to subscribe to our podcast over on iTunes. Rate and review. It's the best thing that you can do to help out the podcast. If you're still wanting to get back in the game, of course, we have the new player page over on the Descent Champions at descentchampions.org/new_player.php. I believe that's going to be updated to reflect that Steam still has Descent for sale. So you can get links to buy it from over there. And
You'll
just
soon know.
Yeah, cool. And just watch our Facebook and Twitter to find out when the next stream is. And until then, till next week, I am Ron Clee.
And I am Morphid.
And we will see you in the mines.